Hey, what's going on, guys? I just got done with both reviewing the coaching session I had with Nabossi on Even Shaman, as well as recording the Boomsday meta video. Um, I wanted to go back and do a reflections video on Even Shaman because I feel like although the coaching session that we had with Nabossi was really it helped a lot. We explored a lot of ideas. Um, there were some things in that video that I tried to push for, or that I said that were a little bit inaccurate. And so I wanted to make this solo video to kind of go more in depth. Also, if you don't want to watch the hour and a half video of Even Shaman coaching, you can kind of get some of the basic ideas out of this video in a much easier, more digestible amount of time. So the way that I want to start this out is by looking at both what I consider like a basic Even Shaman list, and then also what the Vicious Syndicate report had as their basic Even Shaman list. And so essentially, this was the Even Shaman list that I ran for a long time. Originally, these Amani Berserkers were Direwolf Alphas, but as discussed in the coaching session video, we've decided that Direwolf Alpha might not be the most useful 2-drop. Um, it has merit, it buffs up your board, so it can help with trades. It can be there for a little bit of extra pinch damage that you need, but especially with the prevalence of Odd Rogue and the 2 damage hero power, having the 3 health minion can be really good. As well as against, Odd Paladin, having something with more health is good because it means they have to put more resources into actually killing it. So I really like Amani Berserker. It also is much better with Earthen Might because it means you can get a 4/5, and that's pretty scary on like turn 3 or turn 1 or turn 2 if you coin it out. Um, Aside from that, this list doesn't have that much going on with it. In the video, we discussed the elemental synergy and whether Calamos was worthwhile. I'm still not positive whether Calamos is actually worth running. In this list, you run 1, 2, because you get 1 from Menacing Nimbus, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 elementals. That seems, okay. Calamos can be a big swing, so I think, in a basic shaman list, he's pretty good. Um, I think he's worth considering cutting, unless you want to go more into the elemental train, but he's a pretty big bomb, and part of the reason that you play Even Shaman as opposed to some of the other aggro decks is because you get more late game, which was something that in the video with the coaching session we didn't really touch upon. Um, if you weren't going to run this much late game, then there's really no reason to be running Even Shaman, unless you're doing it for the payoff cards, which is like Mercspark Eel. Um, the fact that you're running an aggro deck that also has some late game oomph is why you run this deck. So I think Calamos is an integral part to that. Also, in the coaching session, I pushed for Hagatha to be phased out of Even Shaman because I didn't feel like in control matchups it did enough. Um, I've since decided that Hagatha is actually incredibly strong. Um, Against aggro, it's a clear. You don't really have those because you're Even Shaman. Your clears are only Mossy Horror and then Hagatha. Hagatha is also insanely powerful against Odd Paladin, because if they level up their board, that's all 3/3s, you can clear that with Calamos, or not Calamos, with Hagatha Battlecry. And the hero power, it's a little bit random. It can sometimes not be super good, but random spells typically are very strong. It also allows you to get odd cost spells, so stuff like Lava Burst, I don't know what else. Blazing Invocation is pretty good. Earth Shocks, Unstable Evolutions. So it can give you a lot of value. That was the main thing I wanted to stress with this little video, is that in the coaching session I tried to really push for Hagatha to be out of this list. And on reflection and giving it a little bit of time to think about, I think Hagatha is definitely core to the Even Shaman package. Aside from that, this is pretty standard. I still think Primal Fin is kind of iffy. I still think Vicious is kind of iffy, but it helps your Corpse Takers, which is good in the aggro matchups. So this is like your standard Even Shaman list if you're looking for one of those. If we compare that to the Vicious Syndicate list, it's fairly similar. It runs the same top end that we do. It runs double Primal Fin, which Primal Fin's pretty good. It's a 3 health minion, so it doesn't die to Odd Rogue hero power by itself. It runs double Knife Juggler. Knife Juggler is a card which I pushed to remove. I don't think it does enough, it's good sometimes because you can try and like snipe big minions or like clear off tokens, and that's worth considering. And also, it's kind of the same thing with dire wolf alpha. I just like having the fact that you have 3 health minions with Amani. I think that Amani Berserker is essentially like the best early game card you can run for a list like this. In it goes with Merc's Dark Eagle. Those two are the only two threes that are really worth running. So it also doesn't run a second Earthen Might, which if you're running the two-twos already, you really need to worry about them dying. So I think that the second Earthen Might should definitely be there. It's worth considering cutting Earthen Might if you're playing the 2-3s, but I think if you're playing the 2-2s, you need Earthen Might as a 2 of, because that extra health can be so important. Um, there's no real way, like, I don't understand what the game plan is unless you mulligan really well against Odd Rogue, because this dies to hero power, this dies to hero power, this dies to hero power, and it just seems like a bad time for you. Um, I think that this list is inadequate, but if you get through the early game, Direwolf's okay. Knife Juggler's probably better in the late game than Amani Berserker is, so that makes sense. Um, the second Menacing Nimbus is cool because you get an extra elemental that can really help, especially with your Calamos training, and Primal Fin is kind of meh. If we look back, I'm not actually sure what they're running that we're not. Oh, they don't run a Mossy Horror. I think Mossy Horror is a good tech card. Um, Typically, if you're going to be using it, it won't be hitting a lot of your stuff because you're going to be using it from a losing position. So even though it seems like it's anti-synergy, and it is a little bit, it's not too bad. And then I like Argent Commander just because it allows you to fight back for a board that you're losing, or it allows you to push face, especially with stuff like Flame Tongue, Earthen Might. That's a lot of burst that they might not expect because they're typically expecting, Fire Elemental, Calamos for 6, Alakir. So it's kind of in the same vein of why you run Alakir. Also, it helps with the Divine Shield on your Corpse Taker, because the only Divine Shield minion that you run is Alakir. And so having the second Divine Shield is good for that. So I think these two lists fairly, similar. Um, in the video, we discussed some kind of odd tech cards, and so the cards I want to focus on what my opinions are thinking about afterwards, because in the coaching session I really pushed for some of these weird cards. After some experimentation and time to reflect on it, I want to give my absolute opinion on it. So I think Defender of Argus, especially as a one of, is pretty good. It's a little underwhelming, but if you're looking to stray a little bit from the normal list and help your aggro matchup a little bit, it can be really good. This is also really good in conjunction if you're running all the 2-2s, because then you can actually buff them out of hero power range for Odd Rogue, and the little extra survivability is really nice. So this allows you to run the Knife Jugglers a little more safely. So I like Defender of Argus in this deck. Um, this list that we made ran only one Fire Plume because we cut it for a Defender. I think Fire Plume is really good, um, especially if you run Calamos. So if you're going to slot Calamos back into this, then running a second Fire Plume is really important. This deck has a lot of direct damage on their cards, so that's good for maintaining the board, which is kind of your entire game plan. Sneaky Devil. Sneaky Devil was a card that, we kind of joked about at first, but in some of the games that we played in the coaching session, it actually was fairly strong. It's definitely a bit more of a win more card, but it also helps you push, like, even board states way into your favor. So I think if you're looking for something a little bit odd, um, Sneaky Devil is a card worth considering. It's definitely not the strongest, a 4 mana 2/2 is pretty weak, but if you're already in a decent board state, or like an even board state, this +1 damage on everything, especially if you have Healing Totem up, can just destroy an aggro deck or help push a bunch of face damage that a control deck might not be expecting, because no one's going to expect you to play Sneaky Devil. I'd say all in all, out of the lists that we made during that coaching session video, if you're going to stray away from the basic one with Calamos and Hagatha, this was the best. I do think that if you're going to be running the Sneaky Devil list, you might not want to run the Hagatha, just because you want your game plan to be more about winning early, and Hagatha is a little bit, later. It's a I'm in a losing position, hopefully this can help me win the game. But if you're running Sneaky Devil already, you're trying to push for the early game pressure more. Um, I'd still probably try to find a way to fit Hagatha in here just because Hagatha is incredibly powerful. But I think that this list is actually not that bad. Um, I think if you did this switch out, Direwolf for Hagatha, this looks really good. So I like this list, even though it runs this weird card. I think, it seems weird looking at it. I think in practice it's not too bad. And then I've nicknamed this one the Tempo Even Shaman. This list I pushed heavily for during the video. This list is awful. So you should not be running this list. It turns out that Pint-Sized Summoner, getting your 4 drops out early, is really not that impactful, typically, unless you're getting a Corpse Taker, or in case you're getting this weird Mad Hatter that we ran. Um, I don't believe that this is worth a slot in Even Shaman anymore, after practicing with it. And then since this is not worth a slot, that means that Mad Hatter is definitely not worth a slot, because part of the reason you ran it was because you could pint size on 2 with your totem, try and maintain early board, and then get Mad Hatter on 3, um, and get a quote-unquote 3 mana 6/5. Um, it's way too, like, bad. It's, it's not gonna happen very often. It's pretty bad. I think Bone Mare is okay. Bone Mare's a card to consider in some of your Even Shaman builds, but this card's awful, this card's awful. And so from this list, I'd probably go like Agatha, we can throw in a Calamos, and we can throw in a Menacing Nimbus just to get that elemental count up. And I think that that's a much better list. It's very similar to the ones we had before, and that's a good thing, because we strayed a little bit too far from the average, and it went really poorly. So essentially, the Mad Hatter and Pint-Sized Summoner list is deleted, and it's not worth running. That's kind of what I wanted to say about Even Shaman in terms of what we went over list-wise. Um, Obviously, like, the meta evolves over time. I think that Even Shaman was never particularly a tier 1 deck. Um, Even though some sources like the Vicious Syndicate would state otherwise. I just feel like in the meta, especially in the ladder meta, it dies to too many things. It gets out-teched by cards that are already ran for other matchups. It it doesn't have the staying power that you need unless you're running like this basic one, which has a lot more late game. But even then, Even Shaman kind of feels a little too fair to me. Like, you're running Even, and your payoff is 1 mana totems, which are okay, and you get Merc Spark, which is great versus aggro decks, but if you're going against control, the 2 damage ping really isn't going to be that impactful. So I don't think Even Shaman in the post-giggling Boomsday meta was really deserving of its like popularity. It's an interesting deck to play. It's pretty fun, but I just don't think it has the staying power, really. Especially if the meta slows down a bit, where there's less aggro, because you really can beat up on like Odd Paladin pretty well. I'd say that that's one of its best aggro matchups. I don't know. It just Even Shaman seems a little too high rolly for me. In Wild, it's a different story. They have a bit much different set of cards, but the standard version seems a little bit too fair for me. Um, you know, I could be totally wrong about that. Hopefully, with the new expansion coming out, Even Shaman will get some support, and maybe that'll change my mind. But currently, at the end of the Boomsday meta, I don't believe that Even Shaman was deserving of as much praise as it actually got. So, yeah. Thanks for checking out this video. I just wanted to put this out as kind of like a side piece to the coaching session. And I hope you guys, learned something a little bit from this, and have a good one. See you next video.